Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second edition this week of TIME100 Talks, our live event program where we bring together leaders from around the world from all fields to spotlight solutions and search for a better, healthier, more just world. Our program today will focus on the extraordinary mobilization for equality. We're continuing to see protests all over the US. They're spreading really now all over the world with demands for police reform and criminal justice reform. But we're also seeing what is an overdue awakening to the realities of systemic racism. That is the theme of today's issue of Time Magazine and the cover story in today's Time Magazine. It's also the theme of our conversations today on TIME100 Talks. We'll be joined by the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. She will address, among other topics, what's next for police reform. We also have with us the Academy Award winner and filmmaker Spike Lee, who will speak with MSNBC host Joy-Ann Reid about the connection between art and change and his new film, Da 5 Bloods. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan will talk with Katie Couric about how the advocacy in his state fits into the larger efforts spanning across the country. Dolores Huerta, co-founder of United Farm Workers and one of the most influential labor organizers and rights activists in the world, will be with us, along with Tarana Burke, founder of the Me Too movement. They'll talk about how to build movements with staying power. And my colleague Mia Trams will speak with the R&B duo Chloe and Halle, who will also share two performances with us today. Today's TIME100 Talk is part of an ongoing series focused on equality made possible by our partners at P&G. Now I'd like to share a message from P&G Chief Brand Officer, Mark Pritchard. Mark?
The deep problems of systemic racism and inequality have been institutionalized over centuries and will not be solved unless the white community steps up to help. But many people are frozen, uncertain of what to do, having avoided the issues or never dealt with what is now inescapable. It's time for us all to make the choice, to take action. Read, listen, donate, plan, march, vote. Speak out, step in, and step up to dismantle systemic racism and inequality once and for all. That's why Time and P&G are joining forces now to help shine the light on the path forward for an equal, just, and better world.
To kick off today's program, I'm excited to introduce Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter duo Chloe and Halle, who will perform a cover of the great Sam Cooke song, A Change Is Gonna Come.
I was born by the river in a little tent, oh, and just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. to my brother. I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there's been times that I thought I couldn't last for long. Now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will.
Thank you, Chloe and Howley, for that beautiful performance. We look forward to speaking with you later in the event. And now I'd like to introduce Molly Ball, Time's national political correspondent, who will be speaking to the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, about police reform, access to the ballot box, the 2020 election, and more.
Thank you, Edward. I'm Molly Ball, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So let's start out with the protests across the country sparked by the killing of George Floyd. This isn't the first time people have risen up to demand change, but do you think this time is different?
Well, I think it's different. It's more universally embraced. It is one time where I think people truly believe that their presence will make a difference, that they know their power, and that is why they keep persisting day in and day out. I think that we just crossed a threshold with people seeing the murder, really actually a murder, right on TV before their very eyes, as part of a pattern of injustice in terms of the police department, not to paint everyone with the same brush, but nonetheless, just time for a change.
And the Democrats have unveiled the legislation to reform police forces. Do you think it has a realistic chance of becoming law?
I do, because I do believe in public sentiment. As many have heard me say over and over, Lincoln said public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. And the public sentiment is very clear that while we understand the need for public safety, and we all support that, we don't want to have injustice and abuse of power by the police when it comes to especially to addressing the safety concerns of the minority community.
Have the Republicans given you any indication what they might be willing to support?
Our chair, I'm very proud of Karen Bass, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, who also serves as the chair of the Judiciary Committee, Subcommittee on Crime. So she's part of the debate that goes on this subject in the caucus and in the committee. And they have been making overtures to her, which would be the appropriate place to do that.
Do you think they're sincere about wanting to contribute to this effort?
Well, I hope so. I don't think that they're oblivious to what is going on in the public, that people want to see action. I can tell you, as one who has wandered out there, that they want action. It's one thing to be supportive, but they want to see some change happen. And these are not just my constituents, they're everyone's constituents in the country. So again, I think people believe that they can make a difference and that they will be heard and they will be seen. And if our Republican colleagues are oblivious to that, it will be to their peril.
Are there any provisions of the bill that you or that Chairwoman Bass consider non-negotiable?
Well, we think the whole bill is wisely crafted. This isn't something, we came to this expeditiously because these bills have been in the hopper for a long time, especially our Congressional Black Caucus from its origin has always been addressing these issues that relate to police brutality. And it is, so when we're talking about racial profiling, when we're talking about no chokeholds, when we're talking about no warrantless house intruding into people's homes and the rest. When we talk about some of the provisions in there, they've been thought out for a long time, and they make a complete picture of what needs to be done to hold the police accountable.
What do you say to the activists who are calling to go further or to defund police in some cases?
Well, I think we should go further. That is to say, there are provisions that relate to Violence Against Women Act. We think that we should pass that. We passed it in the House. It's in the Grim Reaper's graveyard right now, but we think we should pass the Violence Against Women Act. Domestic violence is an issue that is a cause for concern that police or firefighters, everyone is called in on, and that causes danger to life. The issues that relate to mental health, we need a very strong mental health initiative in our country. We know that. And I think that would be helpful, because I don't think that our law enforcement people should be taking responsibility completely for the mental health and well-being of the American people. Many of the people in prison now have mental health issues. So we really have to address some of this in a little different way than just law enforcement.
What about defunding police, though?
Well, it isn't. We need to have more resources to do what we need to do to fund the Violence Against Women Act, to fund our initiatives on mental health, to address some larger issues which contribute to the injustices that exist in our society. One would be homelessness. One would be, again, more low-income housing, issues that relate to disparity in healthcare in our country, highlighted now by the coronavirus, taking a disproportionate toll on people of color in our society. The HEROES Act goes directly after that. Environmental justice, that if you live in certain communities, you'll be subjected to pollution in the air you breathe, the water you drink, and make you more susceptible to something like a pandemic when it comes along, but when it doesn't, still make you susceptible to other diagnoses. So again, whether it's education, whether it's economy, whether it's jobs, whatever form of economic involvement, business creation, access to credit, the list goes on of injustices that we must address, and that we do address. Some of it in the HEROES Act, some of it in what we've done in affordable care and what we'll do for our affordable care enhancement legislation in the weeks ahead, as well as our issue about building the infrastructure of America in a green way to address some of these environmental injustices as well, which become health issues.
The president and other Republicans have accused Democrats of wanting to dismantle law enforcement entirely. Are you concerned that idea could damage Democrats politically?
No, I don't think anything is about politics in this regard. I think we have to do what we believe is right. And what is right is for us to, and this has been really the major difference between Democrats and Republicans historically, that we have been on the side of justice. Liberty and justice for all. And justice just doesn't mean in the Pledge of Allegiance. It means in how we conduct our business, how we have access to housing and healthcare. As I mentioned before, we have some underlying causes which contribute to some of the issues that relate to law enforcement that we have to address. We don't seem to have too much support on the Republican side, but hopefully the strong message being sent by those who are demonstrating night in and day out across the country, that message will reach them. I always say our inside maneuvering can only get us just so far. It's the outside mobilization that makes all the difference in the world, and we need all the difference in the world right now.
What about the police unions? Are they part of the problem, and does something need to be done to rein them in?
No, I had actually a very constructive conversation with head of one of the unions, and they put out a statement which I thought was very constructive in following up on the Justice and Policing Act. So I do think that they know that there's some things that have to change and want to be part of that conversation.
Let's look forward to the election. There was a primary held in Georgia, especially. There were long lines, a lot of irregularities reported. How concerned are you about chaos in November when it comes time to vote?
Well, let's hope that what happened in Georgia is a wake-up call for everyone around the country. What I found disconcerting about Georgia, it was the problems were more prevalent in low-income neighborhoods, neighborhoods of people of color, than they were in more affluent white neighborhoods, and that's just not right. Anybody would know that that's just not fair. I heard the lieutenant governor of Georgia say on TV, my son went, no, it took him 20 minutes. Well, I'm sure in his neighborhood it did. But that wasn't the case in other neighborhoods where it was a matter of 3-4 hours at a time of the coronavirus, a matter of health as well as the health of our democracy. So we have to be very vigilant because the attempts to suppress the vote are real in our country. There's a playbook on it. You just see the Republican playbook on it, and you see that they're afraid of the vote. But there are plenty of Republicans in our country who want us to have a fair vote, who want to vote by mail, who want to vote at home, and who are part of a bipartisan initiative to support what we're trying to do in the HEROES Act, which is to get more resources and more opportunities spelled out. Same-day registration, every registered voter being mailed an absentee ballot, access for those who want to vote in person to do so with plenty of advance time to do so. The list goes on, but that is bipartisan.
Joe Biden, now officially the Democratic nominee. What do you think of his campaign so far, and has he been visible enough during the pandemic?
I think Joe Biden is doing a great job, and he's going to be a great president. Obviously, he's doing well. He's leading in every poll and leading in the battleground states as well. We're very honored and proud to have him as the top of the ticket. I know today he would win. We'd win the House even bigger than now. We'd win the Senate, but the election isn't today. And I think that you never know. When I think back 4 months or something, we never would have known that we'd be so deep into the coronavirus, that we would be mourning the death of George Floyd in such a sad way. But I think that the way that Joe Biden has risen to the that's where he is. He is a person of empathy and a person of love. And I think that has clearly been demonstrated. And the contrast between the sitting president and Joe Biden is so vast, and I think that's why the polls reflect that in such a drastic way.
You're a longtime advocate for women's representation in politics. Are you pleased that Biden's pledged to put a woman on the ticket?
Yes, I think it's absolutely great. And any one of them would be great. The names I've heard, I don't know if I know all the names, but the names that seem to be floated out there, all of them have been, I think, have been great, and it is. It's going to be pretty exciting. It's historic. I mean, I was there and was chair of the convention, the host committee for the convention in 1984, and when Geraldine Ferrara's name was placed in nomination for vice president, it was like something we had never seen before. It was thunderous, the response, how people were so excited about it, and that was a long time ago. 36 years ago, something like that. And so the fact that Hillary Clinton was our nominee for president was such a thrill for women across America. And so now to have a woman on this ticket, we expected to win with Hillary. We know we're going to win this time. It's pretty exciting.
Do you have a favorite? Is there someone you'd like to see?
You expect me to tell you that?
I do. I'm asking.
I like them all. I think they're all great. I think they'll all be spectacularly great. And I just want it to be, somebody who helps Joe Biden become president of the United States. I think any one of them fills that bill. So I feel comfortable with any one of them. And I know that the decision is his, so I wouldn't even think of making a suggestion.
Do you agree with those who've called for putting a woman of color specifically in that position?
I think that he is a good choice of candidates across the board. I don't know that we have to get any more specific than that, but I feel confident about the direction he may go in. We'll see. But I do think that it's important to note that every women of every color and region are being considered. So everyone is being considered. And I think that's an important step forward. It isn't as if, well, we didn't have a chance because we weren't even on the list. No, it seems like they have a pretty broad array of women, whether they're legislators or governors or heartland or coastal or whatever diversity that they bring to it, that he has a good array of people from whom to choose. And I feel confident that he will choose the candidate who will be a great vice president. He knows that job very well and will also help us win the White House, which is absolutely, totally essential.
Many advocates say that the 1994 crime bill contributed to a lot of the disparities in criminal justice that we still see today. Do you regret your vote for that legislation?
No, I don't at all. I joined most of my colleagues in supporting it. The Violence Against Women Act was in that bill. The Brady bill, which we had been fighting for a long time, was in that bill. I think some of the concerns in that bill were exacerbated by the so-called welfare reform bill. That kind of was not a good combination, in my view. I did not vote for that.
What is the status of the negotiations for the next package of coronavirus relief?
Well, every time I see a statement by the administration or the Republicans in the Senate, it gets closer to what we want to do. First, they weren't doing absolutely nothing. Never nothing. Now, maybe $1 trillion, but maybe not until July. And we're saying no, more and sooner. But the fact is this: if we do not act in a very serious way now, the problem is only going to get worse. Worse in terms of the virus, and worse in terms of our economy, worse in terms of our GDP. To put this off is a very big mistake. Don't take it from me. Listen to the chairman of the Fed. The money is never going to be cheaper in terms of the interest rates now. And the more we can invest in honoring our heroes, our healthcare workers, our first responders, our transit, our teachers, our food workers, and the rest, honor our heroes by putting that money in state and local government. Very important. Secondly, open our economy by testing, tracing, treating, social distancing. Very important to open our economy and that to do so in a way that keeps people healthy. And third, put money in the pockets of the American people with our direct payments, so important, as well as unemployment insurance, food stamps, etc. All of which, everything I mentioned is a stimulus to the economy. Everything I mentioned has been supported by the Republicans in one form or another in previous bills. So this isn't asking them to do anything they haven't done before, just more so and soon, because it's absolutely essential. Of course, in the bill, we also have our funding for voting by mail, which has bipartisan support throughout the country. We have money for the post office, which is the most popular institution in government anyway. That would be over 90%. For our postal service, which means so much to our veterans who get 90% of their medicine through the postal service, and so many other people in our country who are well served by that, and to have a strong OSHA safety issue for those who are risking their lives to save lives throughout this coronavirus crisis and even beyond that. So we feel that the bill is very focused, very deliberate in what it sets out to do. And I just make one point, and that is all the money that we're doing for state and local government. And you can go to speaker.gov/Heroes Act and see what it means to you and your community, your state or your locality, and the rest. And when you see that all over the country helping to meet the needs to address the cost of the coronavirus outlays, as well as the coronavirus loss of revenue for states, realize that it's only cost half as much as a Republican tax scam to give a tax break to 83% of the benefit going to the top 1% in our country, adding $2 trillion to the national debt for our children to pay for. This aid to states and localities only half that. And it is a stimulus to the economy.
Some people have pointed to the unexpectedly strong jobs numbers last week as proof we don't actually have to do more for the economy. You don't seem to share that view?
No, of course not. Well, how do you think we got there? We got there by the investing that we had done in the previous coronavirus legislation. And we were checking those numbers to be, hopefully they are what they say they are. But nonetheless, they would not be any, things would be much worse had we not taken those measures. The Fed now is spending trillions of dollars to shore up the stock market. Look at the stock market. Why is that happening? Well, because the cost of credit is so low, it's all connected. It's all connected to the bond sector and the rest of that. Well, we should be spending billions of dollars to bolster America's working families as well. If we don't, it's only going to be worse. If we don't, we're not meeting their needs. If we don't, it's really shameful because we can stop the spread of this virus. We can support our heroes. We can put money in the pockets of the American people, which will be a stimulus to the economy. The sooner, the better. But they make the exact wrong argument to say, look, things are good, so we shouldn't do any more. No, things are good in terms of those particular statistics because of what we have done. It's still a huge unemployment rate that must come down.
These are dark times in a lot of ways. So what gives you hope?
When I'm asked about hope, I always say the same thing. Hope is there sitting where it always has been, right between faith and love. Faith, hope, and charity. What gives me hope is my faith in the goodness, the charity of people. I believe America's heart is full of love, that people really care. We've seen that in the past weeks, haven't we now, on the streets of our country and really throughout the world. But speaking just about our country, about America, I have hope in the goodness of people. I think America's heart is full of love. Faith in that love is what gives me hope. And people wouldn't be out there if they didn't believe, if they didn't have faith in the goodness of others. That gives them hope to show up and know that their presence will make a big difference.
Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
In just a moment, we'll be joined by MSNBC host Joy-Ann Reid. She'll be speaking with Spike Lee about the significance of the protests and the role that art, especially film, can play in creating change.
Spike Lee, it's so great to talk with you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.
So let's talk about
Fort Greene neighbor.
Yes, formerly neighbors. I used to spend a lot of time in Spike's joint, and you, coming out of film school, you were always one of my idols, one of my secret mentors who you didn't know you were my mentor, and I'm really excited to talk to you today. So you've been a real inspiration to me, so thank you very much.
Thank you, and I love the work you've been doing.
Thank you.
And will continue to do.
Well, we're going to try. We're going to do the best. I'm excited about The Five Bloods. It's really great. Congratulations. It's a great film.
Thank you.
But I want to go back and I want to ask you about, your body of work. As somebody who has seen all of your films, one of the things that I'll note is that a lot of your work feels like it's about the relationship of the Black man, the Black woman, Black people to America, and the extent to which violence is a critical part of that relationship. Is that an intentional thing in the way that you've made films?
Well, I don't think that it's intentional, but if you want to tell the story who we are, just the fact that we were stolen from Mother Africa and brought here in the Middle Passage, and no one knows how many people our ancestors didn't even make it. And now we're 401 years later, 1619, the first slave ship went to Jamestown, Virginia. So our entire existence from day one till today has been one of violence that's brought against us. Black bodies are, and today we're burying a resting place for King Floyd. I call him King. In Houston, Texas. It's a lot. And one thing I like to say that I'm really going to start getting into, we have to do a lot more research, is post-slavery stress syndrome. That's a new study. And the more I think about it, we got trauma. We as a people have trauma, and we don't deal with trauma, the ramifications, but because we're doing stuff or stuff's affecting us, we don't even know why.
Yeah. And what I love about your work is that, you are a filmmaker who's you're able to demonstrate all of these archetypes within the Black community. Within your films, we all know those people. We know each of those characters. But you're also able to find ways to tell the real stories of Black trauma and translate them into art, whether it's, the Arthur Miller story, as a Brooklyn native, the story of Arthur Miller. Most people don't know his story, but everybody knows who Radio Raheem is. So you know his story because you know Radio Raheem's story, right? And so we're in a moment now.
I'd like to say real quick though, Radio Raheem was based upon the real life murder of Michael Stewart, the graffiti artist.
Wow.
Who was 1983 doing graffiti, First Avenue subway station. He got jumped upon by New York City Transit Police. He died days later in a coma. But it was the Michael Stewart chokehold that I used that for the chokehold of Ray Raheem. And then I'm seeing years later, Eric Garner in a chokehold saying, I can't breathe. And then our brother King Floyd, he's saying, I can't breathe.
Yeah, and it's what, because I went to Arthur Miller because he also is, died in a chokehold by police. So you can pinpoint.
It's crazy where you say Arthur Miller and I say Michael Stewart.
There's so many, and it's repeated, and it's over and over again, and nothing changes.
Over again, yeah.
And I guess that's the thing that the George Floyd story, I think, has hit so hard for Black people. And as you said, post-traumatic stress syndrome, also post-police brutality stress syndrome. Everyone I know is completely stressed because these stories just keep repeating and repeating and repeating. I've been rereading a lot about 1967, 1968, that period.
Woo!
I mean, It's like we're living it again. Do you feel like that?
Oh, I think, yes. That's what makes me hopeful. These young white brothers and sisters, they're taken to the streets and saying no to the stuff their parents and grandparents and great parents and further than that have told them. Racism, you're not born a racist. You're not born a bigot. That stuff is passed down. And I think that these young folks are repudiating that stuff and saying, nah, we got to stop. I mean, I've been looking at this like I'm a historian. And I'm looking at these list of cities, and there's no black people in Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basketball's not even in, so the Utah Jazz, them guys can't be marked. Them guys, they got homes in Salt Lake City, but when they're not playing, they're not there.
Yeah.
Des Moines, Iowa, worldwide, 30,000 people in front of the U.S. Embassy in London, Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, South Korea. This is a world movement. This is a world movement, and that's what makes me enthusiastic. That this energy can't stop. We got to get out and vote. We got to vote. We got to vote. We got to vote. We got to vote. Because our president, Barack Hussein Obama.
Yes.
But wow, we couldn't say the middle name.
I'm here for the middle name. I'm here for the.
I mean, back in the day, though. Back in the day, we like that middle name had to be on the first time. The first time it was running, we had to keep the middle name on a low.
Listen, my maiden name is Lomena, so I love Hussein.
But he has said, I know you've heard this, that this upcoming presidential election will be the most important presidential election in the history of the United States of America. I'm going to take it further. I think this is going to be the most important presidential election of the modern times. Because this guy gets reelected, the world is in peril. Every night I think about this guy has a nuclear code. Let me tell you a story. I've always heard about this myth of the football, this suitcase that when the president leaves the White House has to be with him. I was like, that's some BS. That's some science fiction stuff. No. Tanya and I, my beautiful wife, we gave her the first time he was running. Second time. We gave a benefit in our house. I mean, we raised a lot of money for Barack. House is packed. I said, let me go outside. So I leave my house, and Barack's car is in front of my house, waiting for him. There's a driver in the front, and there's a guy in the back seat with the attaché case handcuffed to his wrist. So the football is not a myth. And I just hope they gave Agent Orange a different code. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Once y'all see the film, y'all understand what that means. Perfection. Okay, so I that is true. But what if they don't? What kind of a film? What kind of sort of dystopic reality will you be depicting? 3 years from now, if he's still president.
But what really gives me a nightmare? If he loses. Now, this I want you to know, I never discussed with anybody as far as on the air,
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing now. But here's the thing: what happens if he loses and he refuses to leave the White House, saying that the reason why I lost because the mail-in ballots, it was rigged, it was a fake election, and he just refuses to leave. Now, what is that scenario going to be?
I cannot even, I can't even imagine.
Have you thought about that, though?
I have absolutely thought about it. And the
Good,
thing
so I'm not the only one.
No, you're not the only one. The first person that said that to me was Bill Maher back in 2016. Who,
I'm late. I'm sorry. I'm late.
I mean, people have been thinking about it from the very beginning before he even actually won. And it's something that people think about, is that if he wins, he may never leave. And the thing is that I think Americans, presume that we're so different from the rest of the world that, but my mother came from a country where the president was president for 24 years. And my father came from a country where the president was president for life as well, and violent and crazy, Mobutu, so yeah, anything is possible. And Americans need to understand that anything is also possible here. And I think it's important to think about it.
So what would happen in a scenario like that? I mean, who the Secret Service, who are they serving then?
Yeah, I mean, technically on January 20 at noon, 2021, Donald Trump ceases to wield the power of the presidency. He has no power to command the military or the Secret Service. So in theory, he has no power to make anyone do anything unless they want to. So unless in
theory, he couldn't call troops on American citizens either.
There you go. Well,
so the Constitution don't mean that much.
If no one's enforcing it. Yeah, everyone has to enforce it. And I mean, I guess that's the thing that is so frightening. And to bring it back to
so what about Barr? Does he still have a job?
Well, that's a little different. He would have to be replaced by the next president. So, yeah.
Yeah, but if we don't have the next president, then I mean, like, Barr's gonna be right there saying, like,
it's a scary thought.
It's crazy.
It's a scary thought. I mean, the thing is, well, I wonder if just as an artist, these are the kind of conversations people are having, right? These are the real conversations that people are having because we're living in a dystopian moment. And I wonder for you, how do you translate that into what you do? Because I do feel like your films, they're like narrative documentaries, like I said, because these are people that we all know that are in our communities. We all have references for all of these characters. How real do you like to get? How, you know what I mean? Like, how much do you want to depict the real horror when you're making a film?
Well, I think that the latest one, Five Bloods, is an example where we show the horror of war. There's no gratuitous violence in this film, but we show what war is. The film is a prologue and epilogue. The prologue is Muhammad Ali. Yep. Epilogue is Dr. Martin Luther King. Both of these guys were out against the war, was not popular. Muhammad Ali got stripped of his title, lost prime years of his athleticism. Dr. King got shunned by Lyndon Baines Johnson because they thought, they were buddy because of the past civil rights movement. But when MLK stepped out against the war, and as long as he was just talking about, sick, black folks sitting together at the counter, or, that was okay. When you start talking about the war, you're talking about money. You're talking about these companies that make billions of dollars on war. Dow Chemical, Napalm. He had to go there. I don't, that was not a coincidence. He started talking about the war and profits.
Do you put yourself in your films? And if so, which of these guys are the most like you?
None. And the reason I say that because I'm not saying in jest.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War was the first war that was televised into American living rooms. So I was born in 57. So 67, I was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. So I'm of the age, like, I'm watching some television. I know what's going on, but thank God I was too young to be drafted. But I'm also I'm seeing what's happening in Vietnam, but I also see what's happening in the United States too. The civil rights movement, the peace movement, the women's movement, all this stuff was happening at the time. So a lot of these memories I put in the film. I remember sitting on my stoop in Brooklyn, and I hear a voice, a woman's voice, screaming, hysterical. And the voice is getting closer to the stoop, from down the block. And it's my mother. She's screaming bloody murder, no pun intended. They killed Dr. King. They killed Dr. King. Those MFers killed Dr. King. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember watching the news that night and seeing 120 cities in America in flames. I remember Nixon resigning. So a lot of this stuff in this film is memories I had as a young kid in Brooklyn. So I wasn't in the characters, but I was a witness, to the stuff you see in the film.
I have to say, Delroy Lindo is a national treasure, and he does some great work for you. But I got to tell you, he will make you hate him. You have to be careful. If I ever see Delroy Lindo on the street, I'm gonna have to be real. Remember, he's Delroy Lindo and not Paul, because he's something else in this film. But that archetype doesn't get talked about enough. 11% of Black men voted for Donald Trump. We know Kanye West exists, right? There are, and probably in 40 years, Kanye West will be Paul, right? That's who maybe he will be. But talk about that character, because I'm glad you included that in there, because we don't talk about that guy enough. Because that guy is there, that's suspicious of immigrants, that's angry at immigrants, that also feels that too much has been taken away from him. He wants his independence. He's that guy. Talk about Paul a little bit.
Well, it really comes from my mother, my late mother, Jacqueline, telling me at a very early age that Black people are not one monolithic group. She's spiky. Black people are not one monolithic group. We don't look alike, think alike, talk alike, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my co-writer, Kevin Wilmot, we said, these guys, when you're in war with some people, with your brothers and sisters, there's very few bonds that can be stronger than the one that you have in battle, where you're dependent on this person to save your life and vice versa. And so it would have been too easy to just have everybody at this reunion, to go back to Vietnam, have everybody just be, just loving each other. Mm-hmm. There had to be some friction, some static, some beef.
And there was. Oh, there's beef.
So we came up with one guy being a Agent Orange supporter. And Delroy at first said, Spike, I can't do it. Can I just be some other thing? I said, nah. And then he understood that that was best for the characters, best for the film.
Yeah. Well, I love Delroy Lindo. I'm a West Indian girl, so we all have a Delroy in our family. I think everybody I know have a Delroy cousin, every West Indian person. But he does a great job. And I also love the fact that in this film, you also depict the side, the Vietnamese side of this. That because the way they felt about our involvement there, the French being there. You have a character who is, from a family of the colonists. We don't think about the colonialism, the colonization that destroyed Black lives, also destroyed Vietnamese lives. And, I think it was important to have that story be a part of it.
Thank you. I did not want to make the Vietnamese people in this film the villains. Did not want to demean them, did not want to dehumanize them. And, they were educating me, because I'll use the term Vietnam War, and they would correct me. Mm-hmm. I'm quick. They said, Spike, we call it the American War. We don't say the Vietnam War. We call it the American War. You came to our country. We didn't go to America. We didn't go to France. the French War, the American War. And it's just, these people are so beautiful, so strong. And like, Vietnam is not a big place. They kicked France and the United States in the arse. Just think about that.
Yeah.
Vietnam kicked France and the United States and America dead straight up in the butt.
Well, I want to just say to you that I think the film is really great. As I said, I'm a fan of your work, so I love all your films. But this one I think was particularly timely because we're dealing with George Floyd. When that killing happened, when you saw that death on tape, that killing, that murder, what went through your mind? Just as a Black man, as an artist, what went through your mind?
Automatically, I thought of Eric Garner, then our brother in Georgia, our sister in Louisville, Brianna. And I'm not trying to be funny or making a flip statement. I can't keep up with the names. I say that with all deep respect to everybody we lost. I cannot keep up with the names.
Do you believe, with all that you've seen, is Black liberation ultimately possible in America?
Well, the struggle continues, and we're gonna keep fighting for it till we get it. It's been 41 years.
Well, I think this film is great, and I want to thank you so much. I'm trying to keep mind of your time. Spike Lee, you are an inspiration to me personally. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done, for all the films that you've made. They've inspired so many people, and for being the uber Black filmmaker who's done it, even when it was not easy to get Hollywood to let you in. So I want to thank you for breaking down the door, brother. You really made a difference, and I really thank you.
And I thank you for the great job you've been doing. You've been putting in work, and I know it has not been easy. I know it ain't been easy. I know that for a fact. But you've had to put up with.
You would know better than most, brother. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Okay, God bless.
Thank you, Joy-Ann Reid and Spike Lee, for being with us, for your time today, for that powerful conversation. And now I'd like to introduce Time Senior Editor Haley Sweetland Edwards. Haley will be speaking with Tarana Burke, founder of the Me Too movement, and Dolores Huerta, co-founder of the United Farm Workers. They'll be talking about building movements that last and having an impact.
Thank you, Edward. I'm pleased to be joined today by Tarana Burke, founder of the Me Too movement, and Dolores Huerta, president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation and co-founder of United Farm Workers. Tarana, Dolores, thank you for being here. You both have led massive movements to enact change over the years, and throughout that work, you've engaged with activists across the country. What are your networks telling you today? Tarana, let's begin with you.
I think that the country, this moment has been bubbling up for a long time, and we've seen it kind of ebb and flow over time. So people are ready. I got asked the question the other day, like, why now? And I think folks don't understand that this is how movement works. That when people were marching in Ferguson and marching against, the death of Eric Garner and the death of Mike Brown back in 2014 and 2015, when those protests ended and those marches ended, the movement work didn't end, right? Just because you didn't see people in the street. Those organizations like Movement for Black Lives and Color of Change, they have been working consistently since then, organizing on the ground, getting local officials elected into government, so that when this movement came, it's even more organized than the last time. So what I'm hearing are people who feel connected to this, who feel ready, who feel like this is the moment. And I think coming off of our primary season where we had, big progressive candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, people are fired up and feel that this is not now, then there's no better time than to enact change. And I think movements like what happened with Me Too, what we saw around climate change, what we saw around gun control, all of that is sort of culminating. And racial justice is at the center of all of those movements. And so it just feels timely.
Absolutely. And Dolores, you've been leading a movement for civil rights and justice for 60 plus years. But many of the people in your network come from a more rural setting at a time when we're seeing a lot of focus on urban centers and urban policing. What are you hearing from your network?
Well, actually, the situation is pretty much the same in our area. And in fact, where I live in Bakersfield, California, Kern County. It is Kevin McCarthy's district. He is the leader in the House of the Republican Party. And I have to say to you that the situation here is pretty much the way it is throughout the country. In 2015, we were acknowledged or recognized by the Guardian magazine that we had the highest number of per capita slayings by police and sheriffs in the whole United States of America. And things have not changed because just recently, just in this last a week or so, we had a gentleman that was protesting and was killed. He was run down by a car, and an African-American man, black man, and the perpetrator has not been charged yet. To this moment, has not been charged. He had white nationalist tattoos on him. There were a lot of protesters that saw exactly what happened. At the same time, another man was who had also run it. By the way, he ran his car into the crowd and killed. He killed Robert Forbes, a 55-year-old gentleman who was actually, I think, kneeling down when he struck him. At the same time, there was another incident where you had an Asian man who did the similar thing. He ran into drove his car into the crowd. He did hurt a young woman. She didn't die. He hurt her, but he has been charged with 10 felony charges. He's on $1 million bond. So, and police were present when all of this happened. And then we have another incident where you had a Latino who actually he did commit a criminal offense. He was trying to hijack a car. The car belonged to a sheriff deputy who was off duty, and he killed him. He shot him. And so I think the whole thing about police being the judge, jury, and the executioner. You know, we have a justice system, we have a jury system. When people do have criminal offenses, that they do have a jury trial. So we can see that the police brutality that has been going on and on and on is so prevalent in our society. And I think people know this, and you know, George Floyd, may rest in peace, but he has brought this to the forefront. And the fact that if someone had the good sense to be able to videotape what was going on, if not, I'm sure it would have all been hidden, and who knows, history would have been different.
Absolutely. So to draw on a very sort of a word du jour of the last 5 or 10 years is intersectionality. Tarana, you of course rose to prominence as a voice representing sexual assault victims, and Dolores, you know, you've the iconic figure of farm workers. I'm hearing from both of you in your first responses that those movements are very much overlapped with the Black Lives Matter movement and this sort of uprising against police brutality and systemic racism. Tarana, can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think, you know, it's funny. I've gotten this question this week, even about people saying, you know, you're supposed to be about Me Too. Why are you posting all of this stuff about Black Lives Matter? You know, or people think I'm bandwagoning onto this. And I'm like, first, I'm a Black woman. I have been a Black woman for 46 years in America. And so that alone gives me the experience to talk about why Black Lives Matter. I'm the mother of a Black child. I'm the sister of a Black brother, right? I have a full experience as a Black human being in America. And that comes with a lot of things. And it comes with the need to have to say that Black lives matter. But also, sexual violence, Black women have the second highest rate of sexual violence in this country. So Black survivor lives matter, right? That there's an immediate overlap in our work if you care about the lives of people who are survivors, and you know that one of the highest rate of survival in this country is Black women, then obviously it's connected to Black Lives Matter. But even further than that, people should also know that sexual violence is the second highest area of misconduct for police, behind excessive force. So the number one complaint against police in the country is excessive force. The number two is sexual violence, various forms of sexual violence. So there are various ways that my work intersects with this moment, starting from me being Black, from me being a woman, from me being American, right? Like, you want to talk about the ways that my life intersects, all kinds of ways, and all the ways that I live my life matter.
Dolores, have you gotten any of that feedback? Have people encouraged you to stay in your lane at all?
No, I think the only thing I think that sometimes people don't realize that what is happening to the Black community happens to the Latino community. We actually had one of our farm workers that was killed by a deputy sheriff many, many years ago. And I mentioned to you incidents that happened, recently. But, even within our staff of my foundation, so we asked our staff, what incidents have you had with police? My gosh. We had one of our staff who had his arm and his ligaments torn. They smashed his head against his car, broke his jaw. He was disabled for 1.5 years in front of his wife and his small children. And then guess what happened? Mistaken identity. They never bothered to ask him for his identification. Another one of our staff, who was a social worker before she joined our foundation, she called the sheriffs because one of her clients, a 16-year-old young Latino, Christine Chavez, was suicidal. What did the sheriffs do? They came and they shot him. They killed him. And she was witness to that incident. One of our Black leaders that we have a chapter up in the high desert. They're all African Americans. And our organizer was detained by the police because she went to the school to protest about the way that they were treating her son and the other young African American. And then this just happened this last week. A policeman told one of our group, a young man who was on the wrong side of town, "What are you doing on this side of town? Do you want to be the next George Floyd?" This just happened, and the racism is so inherent and so systemic. We sued the Kern High School district here in Kern County because of the expulsions of African Americans and Latinos, hundreds of times higher. And that was 3 years ago. They really haven't complied with that lawsuit. 82% of the teachers are Anglo. Only the other percentage are teachers of color. 70% of the students in this 40,000 school district are kids of color. So, we've got this racism. It is so systemic and it's so ingrained in our society and in our systems here that it's going to take everybody, all of the protesters, and I'm saying to all the public agencies and private agencies, organizations, everybody's got to step in right now. This is the moment. As Tarana said, this is the moment. So we have to step forward now and make sure that we do something to end the racism in our society.
One of the things I say is that fighting for Black lives, people need to realize that fighting for Black lives is fighting for all lives, really. People want to throw out all lives matter. But if you don't make sure that the people who are the most marginalized have fully actualized lives that matter in this country, then nobody's will. The people that we don't talk about the most, speaking of what, piggybacking on what you said, Dolores, are Indigenous and First Nations Native folks in this country. They actually have a higher rate of police brutality and police killings than even Black people do in the country, right? So we have to fight for our lives, because fighting for our lives saves the lives of Indigenous folks and Latinx folks and trans folks and other folks of color and other marginalized people, because we're all collectively fighting a system of oppression that wants to do away with all of us.
A recurring refrain from activists throughout this movement is that it will require a sustained effort. Addressing police brutality and systemic racism won't happen in a week or a month. the civil rights movement unfolded over more than a decade. So, Dolores, you've been working as an activist since the 60s. How can grassroots leaders and activists make that transition and funnel the energy we're seeing into long-term influence and reforms going forward?
Well, I think two ways. Number one, we've got to do some deep-seated grassroots organizing, which is luckily that I learned how to do that work many decades ago, and I continue doing that work to empower our local grassroots communities so that they can make sure that this effort is sustained and continued. And the other, of course, is by voting, making sure that we do change some of the policies that we need to defund the police. We need to put that money into schools. I didn't mention this, but I mentioned the Kern High School District here in Kern County. The police department of the Kern High School District is bigger than the city of Bakersfield Police Department. So we've got to take the police out of the schools. We've got to get that money and we've got to put it into our educational system for more teachers, more counselors, more nurses, more social workers, more classes, and definitely change our educational system to start, teaching our kids starting from pre-K that racism is an illness, like Dr. Martin Luther King said. Racism is an illness and we've got to be cured, and make sure that our young children know the history of slavery, the history of domination, so that they can be the champions to get rid of racism in their lives, but also so they will be not poisoned and tainted and with that illness of racism. And this is what we have to do. I think community policing, I think, is a really good option, and we need to start looking at that. But our police are militarized, they're aggressive, they're not helpful. They are supposed to be peace officers to maintain the peace and safety, and they're doing just exactly the opposite. So that whole system has got to end, and we can do it by organizing and by voting to make sure that some of these policies that we're talking about, that they are actually instituted with our city councils and our boards of supervisors and our commissioners and people in our state legislatures and people in our Congress. So it's going to take a lot of work, but we have to develop all of this into laws that can be enforced and that people can be held accountable.
Tarana, do you have any thoughts on extending the energy of this movement over a decade?
Yeah, I think that, again, going back to what I said earlier, this is an extended movement already. We are seeing the extension of what happened in 2014 and 2015 when Black Lives Matter exploded. We are seeing the extension of what was started in the 90s. I was marching against police brutality in New York in the 90s. Amadou Diallo and Abner Louima, we were out in the streets organizing. And so this is how movement works. People think because of the time that we're in, a hashtag goes viral, a protest happens, something really big happens and it's in the news, and people think, oh, the movement has started. And what's really happening, these are moments that galvanize more people. So my expectation is that things will die down, of course, as they will, over whatever period of time, right? A few months, a few weeks, things will die down. And we will have recruited more people who are now fully committed to continuing the work until the next moment. And the goal, obviously, is to have less and less moments. But those moments is what brings more people into the movement, the long, protracted movement. And so this will be sustained because those of us who have committed our life to social justice, and particularly to racial justice, are still here. And we've never stopped fighting, and we've never stopped moving forward. And so we're just, as Dolores said, we are organizing in between the times. We are gathering people, making sure they have information. We are doing the work of making sure that local governments and local people are informed enough to make great decisions when they vote. Training candidates who are progressive. You don't just get an AOC or a Ayanna Pressley or candidates like that into office without having people on the ground who are organized to know that these are the candidates we need to effectively change our material lives. So I'm not worried about it being sustained. I said the same thing about Me Too. The headlines will die down, right? People are going to stop being interested in who the next person is, blah, blah, blah. But the work will always continue. The work that started before me, the work that I started, will continue on. That's just how movement works.
Yeah, and I could say that I think, Tarana, you are the proof of this, because with the Me Too movement, we can look all over the United States of America, and we can see how many women are now in the U.S. Congress, how many women are in our state legislatures. I mean, the Me Too movement just created this incredible movement to make sure that we have women as leaders. And you did this, you and all the people that work with you. And I think that's exactly what's going to come out of this movement also. This is a defining moment for the United States of America. Having lived through the 60s, and seeing what came out of the 60s, a lot of cultural changes came out of the 60s. Unfortunately, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of pushback. Many of the things that we gained in the 60s are being pushed back. But this is very different. And one of the things that's made this different is that, we had a lot of white kids, Caucasian kids that were marching in the 60s because they didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to go to Vietnam. Well, you know what? Now we see those white kids that are out there marching, and they're marching for Black Lives Matter, for Brown Lives That Matter, And so this is, I think, a defining moment for our country. And then they have all of these tools that you referred to. They do have their Facebooks and their iPhones, and they can mobilize and they can educate, they can organize. And so I think this is something that is not going to be stopped. It's not going to be stopped. But we have to make sure that, again, take it back to the vote so we could institutionalize the laws that we need, and that we can elect the people that are going to enforce those laws.
So we, Dolores, you said take it back to the vote. We are, of course, in an election year, presidential election year. How, and quickly, because we're getting to the end of our interview here, how does the presidential election in particular, not necessarily, state and county seats that you both have been working on, advocating for candidates that support your perspectives. How does the presidential election change your strategy when you're thinking about the fight before you?
I think it just adds to the work that we have to do. We have to, continue advocating for Black Lives Matter, but we have to also start getting out there and registering people to vote, making them understand how important their vote is. I know in the Latino community, a lot of people just don't vote, and we've got to make them understand how important their vote is. I just want to add one other thing, too, that I think is very important. I like to say, and when I do my speeches, that we only have one race. It's called the human race, Homo sapiens. And when we talk about educating, I talk about educating our children so that they can know that our human race began in Africa. Civilization began in Africa. And so all of our people have to know that they are Africans of different shades and colors. We have one human race that's called Homo sapiens, and we have to let the neo-Nazis and the KKK, these white nationalists, let them know and make them understand that they are Africans. We are all Africans of different shades and colors. And if people can understand that we are one tribe, we are one, we have a lot of different ethnic groups, we have a lot of different nationalities, but we are one human race. And if we can get everybody, and I would like to stop seeing the word race, don't even use it unless it's attached to human race. If we want to talk about our differences in appearance, we're ethnic groups, a lot of ethnic groups, but we are one human race. We've got to make people understand that. And as one human race, we survived on this planet because we supported each other, we took care of each other, we protected each other. And that's the way that we have to survive on this planet now with everything, the challenges that we have with COVID-19, the viruses, with climate change, and all of the things that are befalling on our human race, that we've got to stand together and protect each other.
Tarana, before we end here, I want to lob you another impossible question, which is how do you support and encourage a mass protest movement for Black Lives Matter and intersecting with all of the issues that you've fought for at a time that we are witnessing a global pandemic that's disproportionately taking Black lives? How do we walk that?
The irony of that, the tension of that has been so difficult. It's been one of the most difficult things to navigate. I will say that, I've really appreciated that in a lot of the protests, they've been giving out masks and they've been not really practicing social distancing, but been trying to, at least bring the COVID conversation into the communities that are coming out. All I can say is that when that fire is lit, it is really, really difficult to pull back. And, you know, I pray that the aftermath of this is not worse. I think we were already, you know, looking at a second wave of this. And I've been reading stuff saying that, you know, if there's a second wave, it's not the protesters, it's about all the mistakes that happened prior to this time. It is difficult to navigate, and it feels sometimes like double jeopardy. But I don't think that we can stop. I don't think that we can pull people back. People are on fire, and when that happens, you kind of got to let them go. And I just really, really pray that people are safe and try to stay as covered up as possible and try to be as conscientious as possible about COVID. I mean, we had experienced COVID in my family, and it is really devastating. So I don't wish it on anybody.
Sorry.
And I think these are soldiers for justice, you know, and they are in many ways risking their lives for a very important issue in our country. And so I think we have to applaud them. We hope that they can keep safe. I myself have been in lockdown. I mean, for me not to be able to be on a protest, this is something that I've done like my entire life. I mean, this is like a punishment for me that I can't be out there. Because I am 90 years old, just celebrated my 90th birthday with a big celebration on May 30th, online celebration. By the way, people can watch it. They can watch it on YouTube or Facebook if you missed it. But it's very hard for me not to go out there so I'm having my grandchildren speak for me because they're out there protesting and, you know, they're out there doing the work. But I just want to just bless and thank all of the protesters out there.
You've done the work. You need to let the young folks do it. You have done the work. You walked and protested, marched. You deserve to sit back and just let us learn from your wisdom at this point.
Oh, and I forgot to mention that I was a victim of police brutality in San Francisco way back in 1988, where they broke my ribs. They couldn't find my spleen, and it was again because I was at a peaceful protest against then presidential candidate George Walker Bush. So, and I've been a victim of police brutality. So, God knows, I think now is the time it's going to end, but we just need to, as I said before, everybody come on and help us, okay? We can end this, but it's going to take a massive, massive effort. It's, back in World War II, because I grew up during that period too, in the 40s, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our president, he called everybody to join in the war effort. This is we are now in this racial war, you might say. So, but the thing is that we can end it. But it's going to take every single one of us to make that commitment that we can do everything within our power, whatever power that we have, with this personal power, agency power, wealth, whatever it is. Everybody has to step in and make it happen. Sí se puede. Yes, we can.
Ladies, an absolute pleasure to talk with both of you. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to hear your insights and wisdom. In a moment, we will join Katie Couric for a conversation with Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. As part of her Time Report series, Katie spoke with Governor Hogan about his leadership of the National Governors Association during the pandemic and the recent protests in Baltimore and around the country.
All I want with inverted tongue, from whence does fulfillment come? When I expel from this mortal shell, will I die for living up? Though you're someone I can't see,
It's a completely unprecedented time in America, and we are right in the, not just witnessing history, but we're right in the middle of history, and I think we're at a turning point. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced in my lifetime, and it's coming in the middle of all these other multiple things going on. You know, it'll be 100 days since we declared a state of emergency in our state. We had our first cases of coronavirus, and we've been dealing with that health crisis and the economic fallout. And now we've got the tragic death of George Floyd and the completely understandable anger and frustration that has boiled up across America. And it's all of these things happening together in a short period of time. It's really quite unbelievable.
I know, Governor, that you've praised Baltimore's police as well as its residents for holding peaceful protests, but I'm sure you remember just a few years ago, after the death of Freddie Gray, Baltimore erupted into violence. What do you think has changed between then and now?
Well, I remember it very well. I had just been governor for 90 days when we had the worst violence in 47 years break out in our largest city. It was quite a different situation than what we experienced this time. In the first few hours, we had 400 businesses and homes burned and looted and destroyed, and 137 police and firefighters injured, and the city was overwhelmed and out of control. We learned a lot from that, and I think 5 years later, we've made a lot of progress, both on the side of the police department and on the community, who said, we don't want to see that violence. We don't want to burn down our own city. I was really proud of the citizens of Baltimore. It was thousands of people came out and peacefully protested. Look, we certainly have by no means solved all the problems of Baltimore or in police departments across our state, but we have taken some really big steps and made some real progress. First of all, we passed criminal justice reform in our state, the most aggressive in America. We did it before the federal bill was passed, and they modeled it on what we did here in Maryland. We lowered our prison population by more than 49 other states in the country. We lowered sentences for many different crimes other than violent crimes, which is still a problem. And we, 90% of the citizens in Baltimore want us to get tough on violent crimes.
Governor Hogan, as you well know, there have been suggestions for defunding the police, really taking a lot of that money, if not all of it, and investing more in communities, in social services and programs. What do you think of that idea? And do you have any plans to consider it?
I think the idea of defunding or reducing funding for police is a terrible idea. We've been able to improve things by investing more in our police, in recruitment, in training, in equipment, try to teach people about de-escalation. We've got a very diverse police department that's majority minority, and I think they're better equipped, better trained, body cameras. They spend a lot of time in the community working with folks, and I think it's really helped. The problems are not solved by any means, don't get me wrong, but there's a little bit more trust and a little bit more communication, and spending more time listening to the concerns and trying to work together is what it's really all about. The second part of the question about investing more into some of the other areas, we've been investing record funding into our schools and more money into the social programs. And I think you've got to do both. You've got to invest in those communities and give people more opportunities, and you've got to help with some of the underlying socioeconomic problems. But eliminating or defunding police is not the way.
You were on the call when President Trump told the governors that they looked weak and needed to dominate, his words, not mine, the protesters. What was your reaction at that moment, Governor Hogan?
First, I thought that was the wrong way to go about it. I thought it was terrible the way they moved in on those protesters. But to a certain extent, in Baltimore, I don't think you should dominate in the respect of go in there and get physical with the protesters. But in the 2015, my theory was peace through strength. So the city was on fire. The police force was overwhelmed. They were throwing cinder blocks and bricks and injuring police and firefighters. The citizens of Baltimore City were crying out for somebody to come save the city. So we did send in an overwhelming force of state police and National Guard, which is what they're there for. So I think you can't just let violent rioters take over a city. So on that part, I agree. But you also can't infringe upon the rights of people that are protesting. And that's a very important right that we've got to protect at all costs. So I think it was a totally wrong way to go about it. If you look at what happened in Washington with that response, and you look at what happened in Baltimore, less than 40 miles away, it was almost a completely opposite response and result.
How did you feel about what happened in Washington? Peaceful protesters being pelted and tear gas to pave the way for President Trump to do a photo op in front of St. John's Church.
You know, I can't speak to what the motivation was. I think it was the wrong move, and it certainly caused a lot of negative reaction. Obviously, it was not a decision I would have made, and I think most people agree it was the wrong thing to do. I didn't support the president in the last election, and I have been, as the chairman of the National Governors Association, and for 5 years, probably the most outspoken Republican governor in America, and one of the folks that stands up most frequently tells him when I think he's wrong, both to his face and publicly. If I think the president's doing something right and I support a policy, I'll say so. I think the president is doing something wrong. I'm certainly not one of those Republicans who's afraid to come out and speak out against the president. I never have been and never will be.
As Maryland continues to reopen, I know you're getting some pressure from businesses to open even further and faster. What are we learning about the virus's spread, and what are you most concerned, not only about reopening, but when it comes to protesting?
So on the reopening, we, as chair of the National Governors Association, we kind of wrote a book, gave guidelines. NGA put out a guideline for all the governors about safe and effective reopening. Here in Maryland, we brought together some of the smartest doctors and scientists from across not only our state, but in America, from places like Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland Medical System. We have a really safe and effective gradual reopening because we need to get our economy back on track, but we've also completely flattened the curve. We've dropped our positivity rate by more than 70%. And we're going to continue to slowly and safely reopen things. It's a balancing act because you want to make sure that you get people back to work, that we help our small businesses, but that we don't cause that spike. And so there's some pressure to reopen, but Washington Post poll just said 85% of the people in our state approve of the job we've done on the reopening. So I'm just going to keep doing it gradually. We are concerned about the protesters. I know that Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, said you have about 2.5 times more chance of getting the virus by being out there in those protests. Just a week or two ago, we had 10-person limits on gatherings, and now we have 10,000 people gathering. So we're going to encourage everyone who was involved with those thousands of people to go out and get tested. It's a concern of all the governors across America that we want to make sure people express their frustrations, but we don't want them getting sick and spreading the virus.
How concerned are you about the unemployment rate and so many people being out of jobs? I mean, it's still a dire situation. What can you do about that in the state of Maryland?
It's the biggest thing that I'm worried about right now. At the beginning of this, we were focused on saving lives and stopping the spread and keeping hundreds of thousands of people from getting sick. And now we're still concerned about that. We're about 9.7% unemployment, which is much lower than the rest of the nation. We're the 8th best economy in the country right now, but that's still really bad. We've tripled in unemployment since the beginning of this pandemic. But some of what other states are hurting more than we are, but that doesn't mean we don't have hundreds of thousands of people that are suffering, that we've got to try to help and get them back to work because this is a terrible economic crisis. The states stepped up and were on the front lines of this entire battle on the pandemic. We stepped up and took the difficult steps that had to be taken to save lives and to keep people safe. And now the states are going to need the help of the federal government. We're not looking for a bailout. We're not looking for a handout. We're not looking to solve problems that existed long ago. We're looking for the past 90 days of money that we've expended and the shortfalls that we're going to be experiencing as a result of this pandemic. We don't want to be putting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of state employees also in those unemployment lines. We don't want to be laying off nurses and teachers and police officers and firefighters and folks like that. In our state, we're doing our best to avoid that, but there's going to be a lot of belt tightening and a lot of things that we'd love to fund that aren't going to be able to get funded.
Thank you, Governor Hogan, for being with us. Thank you, Katie Couric. Next, I'd like to introduce Time's Mia Trans. Mia is the creator of one of the most ambitious projects that Time has ever done, The March, a VR recreation of the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom and the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King. Mia is joined by Chloe and Hallie, whose performance of A Change is Gonna Come we heard earlier in the program. She'll talk with them about how they see their role as artists in shaping the current moment.
Thank you, Edward. I'm Mia Trams, and I'm so happy to be joined today by Chloe and Hallie Bailey, better known as the musical duo Chloe and Hallie. I'm so excited to talk to you both today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to talk to you.
So I wanted to start just talking about your new album, which is coming out this week. I'm very, very excited. You two are not the only artists who have delayed music releases this spring, but you may be the only ones who specifically made it a point to delay in order to honor George Floyd. I was wondering if you could talk to us about that decision and any thoughts that you have on the role that music can play right now in a moment like this.
Yes. So my sister and I, we made a collective decision to postpone our album because we wanted to shine the light on the matters that mattered the most to us in this time. You know, these past 2 weeks have been very overwhelming. We've been hurting, we've been in pain, but we're also very hopeful because our peers are raising their voices and we're letting ourselves be heard and we're not backing down and taking no for an answer. And the injustices of our people have been going on for a very, very long time, but I'm happy now that the entire world is paying attention and they're trying to fix it and make a difference. And Hallie and I, we just felt putting our album out last week just wasn't right. We didn't want the attention on us. And we're happy that we postponed it to this week. We truly believe music is a healer, and we hope that's what our album can do for anyone who's still feeling icky inside and upset and angry. And we hope for the 45 minutes that the album is, it helps them release in a way.
I think it's going to be a much needed balm for everything that's happening right now. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank
you.
You both have spoken so much about the mentorship that you've gotten from Beyonce as artists and the room that she makes for you to really express yourselves. I was wondering if you could talk to us about what, if anything, you're learning from her in this moment about being leaders.
Yes, well, we absolutely love Beyonce, and I think everyone in the world can say that they have been inspired by her in some way, some shape or form. And for us, it's really exciting because we kind of get to see this amazing person that she is up close. Mm-hmm. We get to see how hard she works, how powerful she is, and how confident she is in her worth and herself. And so for us as young women, that's super inspiring for us to just keep our heads up. You know, it's a reminder that, hey, I have the power in me, you have the power in you, we can do that too, you know? And what we love about her is that she has allowed us to flourish and grow on our own, as well as being there as a steady guide. But she is just such an amazing human being inside and out, and we love her.
You know, I've been watching how you've been communicating with your fans over the last couple of weeks, and you cultivate such a close relationship and you're so open. I was wondering what you're hearing from your fans right now, especially young people. What are they feeling? What are they coming to you with? And what do you feel the role of young people is right now?
Yeah, so we love our supporters because it kind of feels like we are a family in a way. And I love how diverse everyone is, all shapes and forms. And what we've kind of been seeing online, I'm so happy we can stay in touch with each other that way, especially being on lockdown and everything. But as we've been communicating with them online, a lot of them have been hurting. A lot of them have been inside of their thoughts because they're alone during this time and they're feeling very overwhelmed. But I love it because I feel like my sister and I can kind of use our voice and our music to help in a way and really form this bond that's unbreakable. A lot of our supporters have been with us since we were like 13 and 11 doing YouTube covers. And, you know, everyone is born with a gift. God is giving you a gift. And I feel like my sister and I's is music, and to help inspire others to be more comfortable being themselves and reach their highest potential. So if we even do that for one person, I feel like we've done our job. And yeah, I'm happy to do it with this one.
I wanted to say, I've been listening to a lot of your music during quarantine, and it is very healing for me, but it's also always just so personal. You really get a look inside what you both are thinking and feeling and the parts of yourself that you're exploring. And I was watching the videos you posted to announce that you were postponing your album, and then your incredible cover of We Shall Overcome and Lift Every Voice and Sing. And I was just curious, for you as artists, as you are processing all of these emotions, feeling so many things, how is it starting to affect your music? How is it affecting your process? How are you channeling some of those feelings into your art?
Absolutely. Well, wow. We have always used music as an outlet. Anytime we're feeling saddened or just emotional, that's immediately what we run to. Mm-hmm. So during these past few weeks, of course, that has been the number one thing. And speaking of our cover, we decided to sing two of these powerful songs that we have always heard growing up in our household, Lift Every Voice and We Shall Overcome. Those have always been the songs of perseverance. And we had always wanted to just show our supporters that, okay, even though we're all collectively hurting and going through this, here's something that may soothe you, that may bring you peace and calm at this time, because we think it's beautiful that, people are using their voices to speak out and stand up for what they believe in. And we want to be a part of that as well. And, some things that we've been saying to our supporters as well, like it's okay to take breaks from social media, especially our Black brothers and sisters, because it's traumatizing. I mean, some of the videos that you see, and for us, it's okay to just step away and meditate and have prayer and turn to music and turn to healing, turn to some sort of art form that brings you peace. So that's definitely what we've been doing. And that's how I've been kind of taking it easy, taking breaks and just singing songs that are hopeful to me in my heart.
Well, that really leads into my last question, and so important for everyone to take care of themselves right now and find those moments to step away and just meditate, pray, whatever it is that you use to soothe yourself. Aside from the self-care, could you talk to us about, are there ways that you're cultivating joy in your life, looking for joy, finding joy? What are the things that are making you happy right now?
What instantly makes me happy is hanging out with my sister and my little brother. We've been having so much fun in quarantine together. We've been binging amazing, funny reality TV, and it just helps me feel so happy and grateful that I have an amazing support system and a family that loves me. And, whenever I'm really starting to get inside my head and I feel like I can't get out of it, I like to pray a lot. I love to put on gospel music and just give praise and glory to God and the universe. And I also like to work out, because the pain that you're feeling from working out, you can't think about all the negative thoughts in your head. So it's a really easy way to stop thinking negative things. And that's what I've been doing to kind of help myself feel better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, it's so much fun hanging out with her. I'm the little sister, so I've always looked up to her and been like, oh, this is so cool. And as well, we have a little brother who actually just graduated middle school today. So we're like, oh my gosh, we're all celebrating. So just being out in the sun and swimming and just holding your loved ones and family close. I mean, that's what's been lifting our spirits during these times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chloe and Hallie, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Your fans really, get so much from you, both emotionally and artistically. We're really looking forward to Ungodly Hour this week. And you're also going to be performing Cool People for us. So I'm going to say goodbye and let you lead us into the weekend with some musical joy.
Forgive me.
Thank you, Chloe and Hallie, for that amazing performance. And thanks to all of the guests who were with us in this program today. Also, our appreciation to our partners at P&G who have made this ongoing series on equality possible and today's program possible. If you'd like more information about TIME100 Talks, past and future, just go to time.com/time100 talks. Until then, thanks for being with us. See you soon.